Welcome to the Business of Hotels podcast, examining the issues mattering most to owners and investors. And now, your hosts, Gary and Glenn.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Business of Hotels podcast.
Good afternoon, Glenn. Good to be with you again, buddy.
Yeah, great to see you, Mr. Gary Isenberg.
Well, thank you very much.
So, all right, in our last show, I had a really great time summing up all of the lessons that we learned at Alice. I hope all of you guys go back if you hadn't heard that and check out that show. And I think today we're going to take that a step further, how to actually incorporate the lessons that you learned during the Alice event.
Yeah, and as we talked about in our last show about Alice, it was wait, watch, and be prepared. And I think the key there is preparedness. And one of the things that, we're seeing owners over the last several months and into this year as well, the end of 18 and into 19, is we've been being engaged to analyze their operations and really kind of take a deep dive of their operations, try to find some low-hanging fruit. We all know that the last several years of year after year revenue growth and RevPAR growth, that revenue growth hides a lot of sins, and meaning hides a lot of sins of expenses.
Right.
And usually during heavy revenue growth periods, we have what we call the expense creep.
Right. So people are paying more, just the fundamental nature of the business, and because of that, you could get cut short. You could get caught short when the market starts to dip.
Yeah, so basically, if you think about it, when you first opened your hotel, maybe you paid exact attention to how many soaps and shampoos you were putting in the room, and then over time, now you're buying 10 cases a month versus 3 cases a month, and things just are starting to kind of deplete a little faster. So how do you tighten up those controls?
Right. How do you tighten up those controls,
I think the first thing what we do, and when we're engaged, is we go into a property and we do everything very data-driven. I call it asset management by the numbers. It's kind of like paint by numbers, but basically this is identifying where the weaknesses are. We look at revenue, we look at expenses, we look at customer service, and we look at employee satisfaction. We do a deep dive, spend a couple of days on property. We can do it on property or desktop, get lots of data from you. We benchmark it to similar like hotels, benchmark it to your local competition or a host star and all these types of different things. And we basically identify, where improvements can be made. And so on the revenue side, we dive into things like the STAR report. We look at channel mix and segmentation. We look at travel click reports, your agency 360, are you getting your right demand? All this type of stuff.
Could you explain what the STAR report and the travel click stuff does so people who don't know are familiar with it?
I think everyone that's listening to this
probably
knows a STAR report at least. But one of the things in a STAR report is also sometimes it gives segmentation detail. How are you doing a transient? How are you doing a group? And we kind of look at those trends and analyze them. We also look at weekend versus weekday. That's also in the STAR report. How are you performing against your competition and things of that nature? When we look at channel segmentation, we're trying to identify where's the business coming from, because different channels have different costs. Cindy S.D. Green with Calibri Labs, she's done a lot of this analysis with the data she has of identifying the cost of channel mix and customer acquisition costs. So, for example, online travel agencies have a commission can be northward of 25%. So that's a very expensive channel. Whereas booking direct to the hotel could have a very low cost. So how do you move your business from different channels? What we find in general is I have a couple of mantras. And one of my mantras is what gets measured gets done. Meaning, if you're not measuring how much OTA business you're getting versus direct and so forth, you're never going to move the needle and reduce that cost. But if you're measuring and looking at it on an ongoing basis, you're going to focus and put attention to it.
And there's even, if you have the right partner that gives you good distribution, you might even be able to still utilize OTAs, but some of the lesser known ones that you might have to pay less of a commission to. That's just one way you can save money.
Correct. It's just understanding the mix, looking for opportunities, and then we benchmark it to best practice that we've seen at other hotels or what other hotels are doing. And then if you look at like the Travel Click Agency 360, a great data tool. A lot of hoteliers misuse it because it has also a ranking ability to kind of rank you against comp sets and so forth. The ranking is not what's important. What is important is it helps you identify what agencies, when I say agencies, meaning like travel agencies and other booking sources, are booking at your competitor hotels. So maybe there's a business from ABC Travel that's booking business at your competitor and you're not getting any of that, or you're not getting your fair share. Well, how do I go after ABC Travel? And there's ways to kind of track down the IATA number of that agency to find out what company they're booking for. So we try to help hotels identify an action plan. Then take those companies that you've identified that you want to shift share, and then develop true marketing action plans to go after. Now, I'm sure everyone that's listening to this podcast says we're doing this.
Right. But are they really doing this, or are you fooling yourself into believing it?
Right. And what I find is every time we go in, we find opportunities. So, and that's on the revenue side. And then on the expense side, we'll look and we'll benchmark payroll. We'll look at, and I say payroll, I mean productivity. I'm not just I don't worry as much as the dollars, because the dollars are a derivative of hours worked and wages paid, the hourly rate paid. We can't impact the hourly rate, right? We're not going to sit there and say, oh, just lower someone's wage by $5 an hour.
No, but what you're saying is if somebody is working an hour, you can make sure they're working an hour instead of 40 minutes.
Correct. So we look at productivity, and we measure productivity and benchmark it to other hotels and come back with suggestions. And then we also look at, as I mentioned earlier, in expenses, customer acquisition costs.
Right. I want to get into that, but I do want to talk about that productivity thing, because I'm just thinking. I've been in hotels a lot lately, and I've been noticing this productivity issue. Sometimes, like the bell folks or folks delivering room service, they sit and they wait for an elevator, and then they say, no, you go, and they sit and they wait. And they say, no, you go. And I see a lot of these things where they're being paid by the hour. They're not incentivized to move it along quicker to get each task done. So I'm finding, like, even with certain basic things, that you could probably rethink how an organizational process in order to move those things a little bit forward.
Correct. There's many different ways to look at expenses. If we look at productivity, housekeeping is the one area that is truly a production-oriented job, right? Front desk, if it takes 10 minutes to check a customer in, that doesn't mean you're going to check in 6 customers in an hour. It depends on how many customers walk up to the front desk.
That's right.
So it's not a true productivity.
Right.
But in housekeeping, if you start your housekeepers at 9 o'clock in the morning because and start going room by room to clean them, that is productivity, and you can control that productivity. So identifying the tasks that they do and how they do it, and look at ways to make that more streamlined. But what we do is we benchmark to similar like hotels when we do this. And it's interesting, and we also benchmark to seasonality within a hotel. We recently worked with a client that developed a staffing guide. They didn't have a staffing guide before, so they came up with a production standard that they budgeted for the next up and coming year for housekeepers. Great. And now we had something to hold them accountable to, and so forth and so on. But when we did our analysis, we came to find out that this budgeted standard production benchmark that they came up with for their staff was lower productivity than the productivity in their slowest season.
Huh?
Yeah. Is right. Because typically what happens in your slowest season is you should have, highest productivity, should have low productivity. Meaning if you were going to clean 5 rooms an hour in your slower season, maybe you're cleaning 3 rooms an hour because you only had 3 rooms occupied. Or what, you know what I'm saying? Whatever.
But in that case, wouldn't you just send home the individual earlier?
Correct. But my point to some degree, but my point is in lower occupancy periods, your fixed costs are going to be more weighted, so your productivity is going to be less.
I understand.
Okay?
That makes a lot of sense because there's more idle time for people.
Right.
Going back to what you said at the front desk, that person's not actually working a lot if nobody's coming and going.
Correct. So that's what we see. But this hotel, in their slower period of time, had the best productivity. And then we said, okay, but let's track that to customer service. Did customer service scores dip? Because maybe they cut staff or whatever, and now they're not servicing. Customer service scores were up. So we said,
this is very puzzling.
Right. So we said, you know what? Take that labor standard and apply it across the year. And they did, and they're seeing great productivity out of it. So my point is, we help identify those trends, right? And then we look at, I said, customer satisfaction. We look at TripAdvisor, other, whether it's brand scores, internal comments, and we benchmark and take all that, compile it, and come up with data points and triangulate it and so forth, and come up with, suggestions of how to improve and so forth. Also, then employee satisfaction. And to give you an example of how all this ties together,
right?
It's a very simple example, but but I think it helps make the point. If you look at employee satisfaction, and let's say you were looking at the engineering department. Now, you know what an employee satisfaction index is, right?
Yes, but why don't you share that?
So basically, hotels go out maybe once a quarter or twice a year and do a survey to all their employees and find out, kind of what's the temperature out there. Are they happy? What's the morale? So forth and so on. And when the survey comes back, it breaks it out by department and it breaks it on different criteria, and it allows you to kind of analyze and hone in and dig into what issues are.
And people are honest on those things?
They're usually, they're not putting their name on it.
Okay.
And it's usually a check the box kind of thing. It's not necessarily. There are open comments as well a lot of times.
Right.
But those are probably more few and far between because they're afraid they're going to get found out.
Yeah,
but if
course.
I'm just ticking a box, I can be honest. And one of the things that we, like in this example, you might see is seeing that in the engineering department, they're complaining that they don't have the tools to do their job properly. Okay. Then you look at you look at customer satisfaction on TripAdvisor, and you find out that your number one complaint is HVACs in the room.
Right.
Okay. Then you go to your operating statement, and you find out that you're over budget for the last 6 months by 50% in HVAC repairs. So tying those three data marks together, you're sitting there and saying, maybe we need to spend some capital dollars and replace the HVAC units.
Right.
So that's a very simple example of what we do with this data and the plan we come up with.
It's not very linear, right?
Correct.
You really have to use a lot of critical thinking in order to draw these actual money-saving conclusions.
Correct. And so we bring all this stuff together. And what's interesting of what we do, once we bring the report and we go over it with our clients, we show them the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And what's also interesting, you can have something that's a strength and is also a weakness, or something that's an opportunity that's also a threat, depending on how you handle it. So we prepare it all, and then what we do is we can either do a number of things. We can give them a report, and they go off and implement it themselves. We can help them implement it. We can become kind of like managing their management company to influence them to implement these things. So we can stay on in an ongoing asset management capacity, if you would, to help implement these things.
Interesting. So what other issues are you thinking about in terms of productivity? Maybe you could give us a couple more real life examples of some of the more common places that folks can find some sort of savings or increase of productivity.
Some of the more common ones, obviously, is how are you managing your channel mix,
right?
Between OTAs and things of that nature.
How about this?
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the sales and marketing team that a lot of hotels have. I'm also thinking that a lot of times they might be younger people, and they may have started their job within the last 10 years and have never really understood what a down market is. And I have a feeling that you might be able to wring some productivity out of that because they may not be working up to capacity because things have been so good. And it's an issue of if you're making, an example of X amount of dollars profit, you don't realize that you probably could have made X amount of dollars of profit if you did, Y maneuvers.
It's interesting you say that, because there's before we get into sales and marketing, but just going back to expenses as a whole, we worked with an owner that had 4 or 5 hotels owned and managed by the same management company. Meanwhile, and they were all New York-based hotels, and meanwhile they had 5 different laundry providers. They outsourced laundry. And
that seems silly.
It does seem silly. And when we analyzed it and looked at it, some were being charged by the piece, some were being charged by the pound. And what I mean by piece by the pound is a king sheet, if we're paying $5 to launder it, that's a piece. If by a pound, we might be paying 50 cents a pound. If that sheet wet weighs 5 pounds, you're paying 5 pounds, whatever, right. However they weigh the linen, right? So the point of the matter is the weight, it's not wet, it's dry, but the weight is how much by pound you'd be paying for it. So there's different ways you calculate it, right? One of the contracts for this company was by the pound. They didn't have a scale.
So they didn't have a scale.
They weren't weighing the linen.
Well, how do you charge something by the pound if you don't?
The contractor or the company, the service provider, was weighing it.
Oh, God.
So you have no verification.
Right.
So what they did is said, okay, we're going to convert it to the piece. Well, guess who did the conversion?
The vendor.
The vendor.
Man, what a lucky vendor.
So yeah, so when we came in, we took the linens, manufacturer weight from the linen, calculated what should be on the pounds, and recasted the pounds, and they were being way overcharged.
Yeah, of course.
So my point is, there was a huge opportunity not only to fix this one issue, but also to competitively bid all of them. So these are the type, even though they had a central purchasing person and the whole bit in this company, it wasn't being done. So we try to find these opportunities and put improvements in place.
Excellent. I do want to talk about that sales and marketing thing, but we're going to do that. Just stick around because we'll be right back after this quick message.
Hi, this is Gary Isenberg with LW Hospitality Advisors, president of their asset management division, where we bridge the gap between hotel ownership and management. View us at our website at www.lwhospitalityadvisors.com. You can always email me at gary.isenberg@lwhadvisors.com. Feel free to call me as well at 212-300-6684, extension 108. Look forward to speaking to you or receiving your emails.
So, Gary, I'm really curious about this sales and marketing thing. Because one of the issues that I see is there are a lot of great professionals out there, but being that they may not have been familiar with the downturn, they may not sometimes have some of that hustle, or they just may not be maximizing the opportunity that they have out there.
Great point, Glenn. And one of the things we look at when we go in and do this, what I call SWOT, if you would, this deep dive operational review, is in the sales and marketing side, we also dive into the marketing action plans and marketing plan for the hotel. And we look for very detailed actions that we're expecting the sales managers to be performing. If that's making 100 cold calls a day or whatever these numbers are, and again, that they're being measured and metrics are happening. Now, that all being said, and I think where you're going is the one thing that is very hard to measure is the soft skill, right? Of really how effective are they on this? And that comes back to bookings and things of that nature. But that's a little bit more difficult, right? One of the things we've also recommend with our clients, and we look for opportunities, how do we consolidate? We worked with a client that was acquiring 12 Marriott Select Service branded hotels. And before they acquired the hotel, they engaged us to hire a complexing plan. How do we reduce this? Instead of having 2 or 3 salespeople at each hotel, how do we take those bodies and incorporate into one centralized sales office, since we're going to be calling upon the same clients? So we look at opportunities of that as well. But again, the soft skill is the hard part.
Is there anything that hoteliers could do to make sure that their potential or existing sales and marketing professionals have those skills, or how they can improve those skills?
I think the key one is making sure you have metrics that measure the performance of those skills.
Right.
So if we're tying to bookings or number of customer interactions or whatever that measurement is, if they're performing that, then assumption could be made, if they're making the goal, that they have the soft skills to get them there.
Right.
There are lots of different organizations, that will help with training and so forth on sales. But I think the key is really, watching what they do, bring them on calls, and monitor. But I think that for us, it's really measuring the metrics to make sure that the performance is happening.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense to me. All right, what other areas are you looking at in the hotel to make it more efficient, be more productive, or just add value for each employee's participation?
Again, looking, as I said earlier, really understanding the cost of acquisition of customers. When we look at customer acquisition costs, we look at everything associated with it. So we look at, for example, travel agency commissions, which would be like your online travel agency. We also look at booking fees on reservations. We look at sales and marketing payroll, advertising expenses. And all this we roll up into what we call customer acquisition costs. And we break it down by categories. Online travel agents, like I said, salaries and wages. And we benchmark it to similar like hotels, and understanding where your differences are within those expenses. And then helping to develop an action plan to improve to get to the results you want to see.
One of the things I think is a good idea, and I know you'll tell me if I'm crazy, but I think the general manager needs to be in the breakfast area, talking to people, finding out why they're there, where they're coming from. And I think that type of on-the-spot research will really help inform the decision-making.
I think any feedback you can get online directly from customers is important. and understanding the impact. You know, a lot of times, like I sit here and I say metrics and measure and all this and that. But the thing to keep in mind is we're also measuring customer service. And we need to always cross-collateral, or not collateralize, but cross-measure to that. If there's things we're doing and implementing that's having a negative impact on revenue or customer service, we need to rethink that. So we got to constantly tie it back to that. But going back to your comment, direct interfacing with the customer and having time of whether it's the GM, the director of sales. Actually, sales managers working the breakfast room is a great opportunity. Find out what companies people are working for and so forth and so on. I mean, those are soft skills that you need to be teaching. Also, you know, looking at reader board surveys. And there's companies you can hire today to go out and identify what businesses are having meetings and conferences at other hotels.
Right. I was going to say, get in your car, go to some of those other hotels,
Correct.
see what kind of business they're getting. Drive by. Maybe you see a particular branded truck in somebody's lobby.
Someone
or
just
someone's parking lot.
told me, interesting, that when you see a commercial vehicle, there's a Department of Transportation number on it, usually.
Interesting.
And if you take that number and you go to the
some website,
local, state, or federal government, you can track back to what company it is.
Interesting.
Right? So even if it's a panel van that doesn't have a name on it, you can find out who's doing the work. So a lot of little interesting things, but I think driving around the parking lots is critical. Understanding who's staying where. Is the parking lot full? Is it not full? Are they out-of-state plates? Are they in-state plates? Are they commercial vehicles, not commercial vehicles? And
yeah, I think when it comes to technology also, if with artificial intelligence coming, I think you're going to get better insight into what's actually happening in your town, right? It's not just that that Beyonce concert that's taking place and everybody's going to buy rooms. It might be 50 smaller little events that you didn't even realize were happening.
Right.
That'll start to give you an idea of some of the different groups that are coming to your town.
So one of the things with our analysis that we do when we identify all these metrics and so forth, it gets people thinking. And for example, I don't know in your hotel room staying here at Alice if you have single amenities or bulk amenities. But bulk amenities is a great opportunity to save money. You know what I mean by bulk amenities?
You're probably talking about dispensers?
Correct.
Right.
Because
I'm glad I got that.
Yeah. Because right now, you know, without bulk amenities, like my first night, I'm staying in a select service hotel.
Yep.
And I opened a bar of soap and I opened a bottle of shampoo. Mm-hmm. And I've been here 3 nights now.
Yep.
And every single day it's been replaced with a brand new, thrown away and on the counter new.
That's annoying.
It's a waste. They just wasted $1, 50 cents, whatever it was.
Well, hopefully they're at least giving it to Clean the World or something like that. A great charity.
Right.
But I know what your point is.
So my point is that we may benchmark and sit there and say your operating supplies are $1 higher than your competition. But it's going to take some of your own figuring out now to kind of dig in and really understand why. And that could be a reason why.
Right. I would like them to have 2 bars of soap, one in the sink area and one for the shower, or at least a big enough bar of soap that I could use it in the shower and bring it back and forth. I'm getting really upset that a lot of select service hotels are now insisting I use body wash. I don't use body wash. I have no interest in body wash, and I'm never going to use it.
See, I prefer body wash than the bar of soap.
Well, good. At least you know what you like, Gary.
But what I also, and I agree with you, I've been saying this for years, that a washcloth, a bar of soap, or a bottle of body wash, and a bottle of shampoo and conditioner should be put in the shower.
Right.
When I take a shower at home, I step into the shower, my soap, my shampoo, and my washcloth is there.
Right.
I can't tell you how many times I've stepped into the shower to realize I have nothing to clean myself with.
Right.
Now I step out.
Yep.
I slip on the floor.
I was actually going to make a joke about you're opening yourself up to legal liability.
Right. So so that's my pet peeve.
Well, it's just one of those weird things that we do in hotels, and it's always been done that way, so we're going to continue to do that.
And another thing also with it is towels.
Right.
How many times have some hotels, a hotel I'm staying at now does it exactly how they should.
Right.
They've got a stack of hand towels on the counter. Perfect. They've got washcloths in these little like cubicles or whatever. And then underneath the vanity, they got a stack of bath towels.
Hey, same here.
And that's great. The ones that frustrate me is the ones that take the bath towel, put a hand towel, and then a washcloth on top. Because what happens is, let's say you need the hand towel.
Yeah.
Now you've ruined all the other towels.
Right.
So now all of them are getting washed.
Right, because they don't know that if you haven't used them, because it may have just become, not
you moved it.
Anymore.
You moved it.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, another thing I can't stand, while we've completely gone off the rails here, is when you hang the towel up for reuse, and then they take it anyway.
So you bring up a really good point. And I think one of the things we really need to be cognizant and cautious of, a lot of times we put policies and procedures in place because they sound good.
Right.
Okay. But are we really adhering to them? And you bring up the whole green, save the world, save water, don't wash your linen programs. And you're right. I can't tell you how many times I've done that and they still wash. And you really, if you think about it, what does that do to the customer? Let's say you're extremely green customer. You're really concerned about this, and you're going out of your way to do this. And now the hotel's told you, they made a promise to you that if you hang this, we're not going to wash it.
Right.
Now they broke that promise. That can be very damaging to a customer relationship.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It makes a lot of sense. And I love how all this actually really does roll back into productivity, because each one of these missteps that you're doing lowers the productivity rate of the employees and winds up costing more money.
So here's another, what I believe, a little bit of a corporate decision than an operating decision, but the idea to save payroll by allowing frequent travelers to opt out of housekeeping. You've heard of this.
I was just going to bring this up. I love that you're talking about it.
So with that, and here's the trouble I have. I'm not sure how it saves payroll. And the reason the reason why I'm saying I'm not sure how it saves, and I'd say it can.
Yeah.
But we got to get it ahead of time. If we're asking the customer when they check in,
right,
do you not want housekeeping service tomorrow? Person's already scheduled.
Right.
So how do we really impact that?
Right.
It's got to be ahead of time.
Okay. So, but yes, it has to be ahead of time. But I think also if you're not doing that proactive approach over time, if customers start to get into the habit of it, and you realize on average 5% of the rooms are going to opt out, you will be able to start to make those decisions, but not as efficiently and effectively as if you had done it ahead of time.
Correct. Mm-hmm. And what happens if, no one opts out? Now you're short on housekeeping. So my point is, I think you got to get a little bit more efficient on it,
right,
on the process of it. And I think this goes back to technology. It goes back to tracking our frequent customers. Mm-hmm. We know that Glenn Haussman stays with us, and I'm saying not at one hotel, but let's say for Marriott as a whole, he stays with us, 100 nights a year. And out of those 100 nights a year, 70 of them, he's opted out of housekeeping. Well, when are those 70 nights? Well, they're Monday through Friday. But on the weekends when he stays with us, he takes them because he's with his wife.
Right.
And he needs to have that room clean.
And I don't need her to know how filthy I really am. But the other thing is, though, that I see a problem with, and I know technology will fix it at some point, is a lot of times I haven't requested out of housekeeping, but I'll keep that do not disturb sign on the door for 3 days in a row. So they don't know ahead of time, and they have no knowledge that this is going to happen every day, that I don't want to be disturbed.
Correct.
So do you think technology will be able to take care of that? It's got it, right?
Well, I think the opting out of housekeeping to some degree is taking care of the do not disturb to some levels.
Yeah.
But then you get what I love about the whole putting it out, I don't want service, don't disturb me, that if that sign is still there till like 7 o'clock at night, they're disturbing you. Right. They're going to call you. They're going to knock on the door.
But that's a whole other issue. They need to do that, make sure you're safe, and and didn't have a heart attack in bed, that sort of thing. But as we start to wind down this particular episode, maybe recap some of the lessons that you've shared with us in a nice, easy, digestible format.
When we go into doing these deep dive operational reviews, and I mentioned one of my mantras earlier, and that is what gets measured gets done. Our other mantra is trust but verify, meaning that trust.
I think Ronald Reagan said that once. Right?
Yes, he did. Thank you very much. So trust what people are telling you, and believe it to be the truth, but verify it, and that's how we do through data. So if you were to ask 10 GMs what their housekeeping productivity is for room attendants, they'll say that they clean anywhere between 15 and 16 rooms in an 8-hour shift, something like that. But then what we do is we go test it. How many rooms did they actually clean, and how long did they pay? What was the payroll? And really look at really what it is. So that's what I mean by that, is trust and verify. So I think that's important, and making sure everything we do at the end of the day and the way we analyze things is we really make sure, is it positive or negative to impact the customer service and profitability? Because that's what we're in business for.
Right. Excellent. So this was fun. I really enjoyed doing this show with you today. So Gary, I think people have probably wanted to know how they could find you.
You can always email me at Gary.Isenberg at LWHospitalityAdvisors.com. You can reach me via cell phone, 201-424-2495. I have it with me 24/7, but I will not answer at 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning.
All right, and if you do want to find me, I will answer it at 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning because I'm that desperate for attention. I want to thank everyone for listening. So for Mr. Gary Isenberg and myself, Glenn Haussman, thanks for checking in with the Business of Hotels podcast. See you next time.